and a warm welcome to the Ladies Club. I'm your host, Vaylen Kirtley. Thank you for joining us once again as we celebrate women who own their space in sport. We have an amazing guest with us today. Dr Zondi joins us a little bit later as we discuss women who are breaking barriers and tearing down stereotypes, but specifically in the world of sports medicine, and there's just so much to discuss. So let's get the show underway, and as we always do, we do it with an inspiring quote. So this one goes like this. Of course, I'm not worried about intimidating men. The type of man who will be intimidated by me is exactly the type of man I have no interest in. That's a quote by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, a talented Nigerian novelist who is the author of The Purple Hibiscus, Half of the Yellow Sun, and Americana. I love this quote because you don't need to be less, never, never, ever. You don't need to be less than what you are to just appease another person. You've got to be empathetic and sympathetic, but never ever lose your view and your direction. I think our guest will have some comments, but maybe you do too. You're welcome to join in on the conversation and share your views on Twitter at sports@SABC. Just use our hashtag the Ladies Club. We're also on Facebook. It's so simple. SABC Sport, the Ladies Club. Time now to introduce Dr Phato Cele-Zondi. She's a woman who's at the helm of sports science in the country and deserves a standing ovation. She's currently the CEO of the Sports Science Institute of South Africa and Chief Medical Officer for SASCOC. A very good morning and welcome to the Ladies Club.
Good morning, Vaylen. It's wonderful to be here.
Firstly, a massive thank you. I know you're on maternity leave and you've come all the way from your family home in Durban to come and join us on today's show. So thank you so much for doing that.
An absolute pleasure.
Okay, so before we get into all of the accolades and pick your brain a little bit, why sport? Take us back to how this young girl got involved in sport.
You know, I'm often asked this question, and the most natural answer is also, why not? You know, what's there not to love about sport? You're involved in sport yourself in various levels and various platforms, and it's an exciting world and industry to be involved in. But really, I think my love of sport grew or developed at a very, very young age. My parents have always been very active, with my dad participating in comrades, marathons, and my mother also an avid runner and athlete herself back in her day. And so I think sports and exercise and activity is just something that we grew up with as a family. I remember my earliest memories are of us attending fun runs with my parents or going and seconding my dad, you know, along the comrades route. And so there's just always been a warmth and a love for sport and for exercise and all that comes with it.
And then I suppose somebody who inspired you with his SAFM interview in Dr. Tim Noakes then opened up that gap to say you can bring this love of sport and marry it with medicine and you can actually go into sports science.
I've always said that was my eureka moment. And when they say things are meant to happen, that was an interview that I was meant to listen to. And really it was. Listening to Tim Noakes, suddenly I realized that I can combine various passions and come up with something that speaks to what I enjoy, where I feel that my purpose lies, and a place where I really feel that I can positively contribute.
And a little bit like South Africa growing into its own as a young democracy, sports science is an area of medicine that is also growing into its own, and it has done over the past couple of years. And South Africa and South Africans have been at the forefront of that globally.
Absolutely, and it's a privilege to be involved in sports medicine and sports science at this stage, because as you very correctly say, in the world of medicine specifically, sport and exercise medicine is a relatively new discipline. You know, when I say relatively new, probably 50 years if I'm ambitious, you know, in terms of the formal, you know, narrowing down and focus of exercise and its various health benefits. So it's an exciting time to be involved in sports medicine and sports science. We're in the relatively early stages, and there's just great opportunity to grow this discipline and really see how it impacts the rest of medicine.
When you got offered the position as CEO, was there any little part of you that was like, you know, maybe it's going to be too much of an administrative role and I'm going to lose my touch with actually working one-on-one with my patients and with my athletes?
I mean, that was one fear, and there were very many others as well, of course. But yes, being a clinician is still very important to me. And so one of the things that we chatted about before I took the role was the importance of remaining in touch with the clinical discipline of sports medicine. And so, yes, you know, CAO there's no clinical medicine involved in that particular role. But I do feel that at this particular stage in my career, and certainly in terms of what I'm have been mandated to do in the business, I feel that being connected to clinical medicine and to patients will only help me do that better and will better enable me to achieve what I need to achieve within the role.
Completely dynamic, and that's just a taste of Dr. Zondi. We're going to be chatting to her in a short while. Stay with us. The Ladies Club continues after the break. Welcome back. You're watching the Ladies Club, and thank you so much for staying with us. Remember, it's so easy to get involved on social media. On Twitter, it's @sports@SABC, and on Facebook, just search SABC Sport and use our hashtag the Ladies Club. We still have our game changer, Dr. Zondi, with us as we continue to chat about women in sports medicine. But before we carry on our conversation with Dr. Zondi, let's shift our attention now to our trailblazer for this week. Dr. Cheryl Calder is a visual skills coach, popularly known as the Eye Lady. She's a sports scientist and performance coach and has been described as the most successful person in sport. Her work is not sight-related, but is based on improving the visual motor system and decision-making. She currently works with England's rugby union team, Formula One driver Valtteri Bottas and Kenny Stills. The sports scientist was labelled as the secret by Ernie Els's victory at the British Open in 2012 after the South African golfer had sought her help in the months leading up to his victory in England. Now, I know that our guest today knows a thing or two about Dr. Calder. She certainly is one of those leading lights when it comes to women in sports here in South Africa.
Absolutely. I mean, her work started a number of years ago, and she was really one of the first people to pioneer the world of sports science and sports medicine. She was there right at the beginning of the Sports Science Institute when it was conceptualized a good 22 years ago. And so along with Tim Noakes and Monet Duplessis, she was a pioneer in this space. I have had the privilege of engaging with Cheryl and even more importantly with the people that she's worked with and who have been influenced by her skill and by her work. And I think, as you've already quoted, a number of top athletes will testify that what she does in terms of the sports science behind the visual acuity, not even acuity, I beg your pardon, visual skills and decision-making has changed their game and improved their performance.
It's amazing for me because she is not a loud woman when you meet her. Her work certainly does speak for itself, and people that have come into contact with her, their testimonies over the work that she's done with them speaks for itself. And I often think to myself, is that perhaps the way that you've got to go about it in this perceived man's world of sport?
Your work has to speak for itself. I think as a female in sport, there are very many challenges, obstacles, barriers that you'll face. And the one thing that will place you in good stead is your work. The product must speak for itself because no one can argue with the product of your work.
I think that you know a thing or two about challenges and overcoming certain stereotypes and biases that people have, because not only are you a woman in sport, but you're also a young African woman in sport.
Absolutely. I mean, there's practical challenges. I laugh about this, about being a female in a man's world. The practical challenge of being the only female in a male changing room when a lot of your work needs to happen in the changing room post-match, and sort of the logistics around that. And then, of course, there's the other challenges that you've alluded to, you know, that come with race and with gender, you know, and I often quote an example of being at a medical room where I was there referring a patient, and I was with my white male counterpart manager and the athlete themselves, a male athlete. And as I handed over to the doctor and he replied to the white male manager instead of his colleague, a doctor. You know, and these are just some of the small things that you'd experience, and there's very many others, and many people have experienced other challenges. But more than the challenge itself is how you react to it and how you respond to it, and how you build from that. And I think that's what I've learned, and that's what has been key to my growth and development in this space.
So what has been the key? Like, how do you respond to those things and those situations that really just grate you and get under your skin?
I think the important thing is knowing how to pick your battles. Not every battle is worth fighting. And also not even in the fight itself, you need to decide how you fight it. Some fights don't need a loud voice and a screaming match. In fact, some fights are best won in what you don't do rather than what you do. And that's been a skill to learn. That's been learned by watching other people and observing how they behave and what their reactions elicit in other people, and knowing what works and what doesn't work, right? And learning from myself, from overreacting in a certain situation and realizing, you know what, that didn't actually achieve my desired outcome. So maybe next time, what I need to do is I need to be calm about the situation and very subtly make a point. So in that particular example, I kept quiet because, of course, the manager didn't know anything, that the doctor was saying. And because we had such a great relationship, the manager, when the doctor had finished speaking, then said, I'm sure you mean all of this to Dr. Zondi. So Dr. Zondi, what's your opinion?
Beautiful.
And the conversation then carried on.
And that's what I think is also so important, is having people around you that respect you and respect your work. So in a situation like that, it's thrown straight back at the person that may have had whatever stereotypes. It's thrown straight back to them, because you've got that support structure around you. And I think you've had that throughout your career, haven't you? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you could see how that guy backpedaled quickly and had to do a retake, and then reposition himself. I have been fortunate in that in many of the circumstances that I've worked in, I've been surrounded by a great team of people with whom we've shared a good mutual respect. A lot of that is built over time, of course. You don't walk into a room and just automatically respect someone all the time. You learn to respect them because of their work, because of their work ethic, because of discussions that you have and debates that you have. You don't always have to agree, but how you have that debate and that discussion and how the other person voices their view and helps you understand their view often is relationship building. Of course, there have also been circumstances where it hasn't been easy, where it hasn't been a walk in the park, and one has had to learn how to assert themselves in a way, again, that will affect change. I had a conversation with somebody I admire greatly, Dr. Judy Dlamini, a few weeks ago, and one of the things she said to me is, Phato, just remember that in a leadership position, it's not always about being right. It's about getting the result that you desire. And so when you're having a conversation about somebody, even though you know that you're right, you don't have to force your opinion to make that other person see that you're right. As long as you get where you need to go, that's what you need to focus on.
Who would you say has been most instrumental in your career?
There really hasn't been one person. I think at different phases in my career, I lent into different people and different relationships. And it was circumstantial. There was a point in my career where I had 3 mentors, sort of interspersed different provinces and different strengths themselves. And, Dr. John Patricius, Dr. Kevin Subban, and Professor Christiane van Rensburg. And I was privileged that I had access to these relationships. These are very good clinicians and top clinicians in our country. And when I was a junior doctor, sports physician that is, these are the people that I lent on for clinical advice and clinical expertise. There have been other relationships, the relationship that I have with my parents specifically, who are very avid and acute business people. And a relationship, for instance, I've mentioned Judy Dlamini, who's a business person. And I've lent on those relationships in times when I've needed advice that was more business-orientated, organizational structure. And so I think it's just there have been fluctuations on the people that I've lent to. But the great thing is that I have had a network of support. And I do have access to people who I feel have contributed significantly to my growth and development.
It's easy to hear your achievements and to hear you speak and say, she's so confident, she must never, ever doubt herself.
That would be the biggest myth anyone can ever tell you. And the most successful person as well. If they said that they don't doubt themselves, I would question that. I would doubt that very statement. Of course, there's moments of doubt. And in speaking to Monet, my predecessor, Monet du Plessis, he himself said, Phato, in my 21 years at the helm of Sports Science Institute, I always asked myself, am I the right person to lead this institute? And that for me was an aha moment, because who would question his leadership, And I certainly feel that myself. There's very many moments when you're in a position of leadership or a position of authority where you think, am I really the best person to be in this position? And you need to trust that you are. You're there for a reason. And you might not be, I've never for a second thought, for instance, that I am the best sports physician that exists in this continent or in this country. But I have felt that perhaps I am the best fit for this team at this moment, because what I have to offer, nobody else can quite offer it in the way that I am doing it. And that's given me confidence. That certainly doesn't mean that I know everything, but it just says I recognize that in this particular situation, there's a reason why I'm here. And so I need to harness that and own that and work that, essentially.
It is a brain that we need many more minutes to actually pick on, but we've only got one more segment left on the Ladies Club. We'll continue our conversation with Dr. Zondi when we return. At Sports at SABC, our hashtag is the Ladies Club. That's where you can be in conversation on social media. We're also on Facebook. Thank you so much for staying with us. Our game changer today is none other than Dr. Zondi. She was the Chief Medical Officer for Team South Africa at the 2017 World Games, the 2016 Rio Paralympic Games, and the 2014 Commonwealth Games. Not only that, she's also the CEO of the Sports Science Institute of South Africa. She was the team doctor at the London Olympic Games, and we've only got a little bit more time to speak, and it's so difficult to go through your entire CV. You have done so much in your less than 40 years here on Earth. So what has actually been the highlights for you, if you could pick out one?
Sure, there have been so many profound and exciting moments, painful moments as well, that render, very valuable to me. But perhaps the most cherished or profound experience that I've had was at the Rio Paralympic Games. And I say that really just because of what I went through and what I wasn't prepared for, and the way that it shifted my mentality. And really, just to keep it really short, I think the most profound thing to me about the Games is that, here I was the exception to the rule, in the sense that my ability and my full physical ability, I was the exception to the rule compared to the people around me. But honestly, what I found there is that perhaps there are so many more ways in which I am disabled, but don't know it, compared to the people around me and how we properly define disability. Here are people who have got physical ailments, but yet have seen so much more of the world, who are so much more mentally liberated, who are so confident, who are so able, perhaps not because of their disability or despite their disability, but because of their disability itself. And it was just a moving experience. I learned a lot about myself. My perceptions changed. I realized that really the biggest barriers that we have as people are those that we place on ourselves and that society places on us. And once we rid ourselves of those barriers, the world is your limit.
Any physically or physical disabled championships or that you go to, it does that. It's the most humbling experience that you can have, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the athletes there taught me everything there is to know about humility, about grace, about confidence, and just about being connected to your sole purpose in life.
So with you having done so much, what is there still for you to do?
Of course, there's a lot to do. I mean, I think I've been privileged to have the experiences that I have, but there are so many more opportunities. Look at where we are in our sports world today in South Africa. We've just come out of the 2018 Commonwealth Games, where we fared a great 6th on the medal tally. But despite the great performance, you're left yearning for more. You're left realizing that there's so much more that we can do as a South African sports industry to better equip our athletes, to assist our athletes, to contribute to what could potentially be. And that's what excites me. And so while I can't define and pinpoint and say this is the next step, because I do believe in organic growth and growth led by need and purpose that evolves on the ground, I do know that there's so much more to come. I mean, look at what we've just begun to see with Akani Simbeni. I mean, he's got his first major title now, and there's so much more. There are very many more Akani Simbenis in our world. There are very many more Wade van Niekerks in South Africa who just need the platform, who need the support to thrive. And that's where we see our role.
It's going to take a huge effort, though, in transforming the South African sporting landscape.
And that's why we're here. Because we're ready to do the work, we're ready to play our part, we're ready to contribute. And really, it's not just us. There's so many role players that are involved and that really are are crucial, I suppose, or not crucial, who will play a small part, you know, in an athlete's development and in the athlete's prosperity. And we're here to put our hands up and say, as President Ramaphosa says, Tumamina, I'm here. I know there's work to be done, and I'm passionate about the work that needs to be done.
Choose me.
Choose me.
How do you manage? Because not only are you you've got a top administrative position, you're a sports physician, you're also a mom to 2 little girls.
And maybe that's the greatest pleasure, isn't it? You know, all of this is fluff compared to that. You figure it out. You know, I'm yet to meet somebody who says they've got the perfect work-life balance, as if those two should be mutually exclusive anyway, you know. I've just read Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, and she has a great argument about saying this whole work-life balance thing implies that they are mutually exclusive. And they shouldn't be, and they aren't. Here we are, you know, you're a working mom yourself. Yeah. And there's nothing to say that I can't be a good mother and also a good career woman. You know, and I'd like to believe that I can be both. They aren't mutually exclusive. But of course, it is a struggle. You suffer from guilt when you're not at one place and you're at the other. And you do the best that you can. Before we let you go, just quickly, your word of advice to any youngsters there that would like to follow your path or that are just completely inspired by you. I always say when somebody says to me, what would you say to somebody to follow your path? And I say, don't follow my path. I genuinely believe that we all have individual paths to take. And it's really just about understanding yourself, what your passion is, and what your strengths are, and then finding a way to match it. And there is a path for you. There's a path for everyone in this world. There's enough space for us all to shine, and the world needs for us all to shine, as your quote says. You know, the world needs for us all to shine so that others can shine. You don't have to diminish your shine. Absolutely not. Dr. Phato, I know you said to me, just call me Phato, don't call me doctor. That's how humble she is. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Ladies Club. It's been amazing to chat to you. Thank you for having me. That is our game changer for this week, Dr. Zondi. She is the CEO of the Sports Science Institute of South Africa. She's also had a number of roles through her young career. And wait, in just a couple more years' time, we'll have a lot more to add to that CV. Until we meet again, remember we can continue this conversation on social media. It's so easy on Twitter @sports@SABC, #The Ladies Club, or on Facebook, SABC Sports page. Just use #The Ladies Club. Until we meet again, remember that greatness is never given. It's always earned. God bless. Bye-bye.